in terms of what we saw in lockdown, yes, there was some real advantages. I think we have to also recognise that it was a bit of an artificial period in terms of a lot of people were working from home, so there was a lot less traffic anyway. And you did see a lot of people get out and about and take that exercise. In terms of the opportunity it creates, I think it's a long-term opportunity. I think what you're seeing elsewhere is significant investment into active travel infrastructure. So Manchester, where Chris Boardman is really driving that forward, and West Midlands just this weekend announced 260 million investment into an active travel network. And I think the key for me is creating dedicated routes, with segregation as well, to make it safer for people. I think it was safer during lockdown because there was less traffic and traffic wasn't going so quickly. But that, as I say, was a bit of an artificial period. I think if we can really focus on that provision of infrastructure to support the clear desire from people to actively travel, and I think we also need to take a step back and understand, well, why is this a good thing? And the Isle of Man is facing an obesity epidemic. We're seeing rapidly increasing rates of diabetes, heart disease, all sorts of disease is really caused by a pretty sedentary lifestyle. So if we can put in place that infrastructure for people, it enables them to make that choice, to take exercise safely, and there's lots of benefits for the individual and also for the island if we can do that.
You've called it an artificial period, and it was, of course, artificial, brought about by exceptional circumstances, but lots of those themes that we saw have remained in part. People's working patterns haven't returned to pre-lockdown normal in lots of cases yet. Some of the island's biggest employers are still working at home. Mr. Baker, how does the department measure those new working patterns and factor that into decision making about how people travel?
Well, I think anecdotally, you're right, and I think it's an evolving picture, Dollin, of some employers have made decisions for a particular length of time to keep people away from their normal workplace. Others are having a more flexible approach. I'm not aware of there being formal monitoring of those things in place, but it is clear that the patterns have changed, and I think that working from home is now seen as a very normal activity, pretty much across all sectors where the type of work facilitates that. But we need to recognise that in the way that we think about what the island needs going forward, and we do need to create the right infrastructure and the right environment to support different patterns of work and different patterns of travelling, and that needs to be intentional, and we need a holistic approach to look at what people's needs are and how best to satisfy them. And I think it's important from my perspective that we have this active travel discussion within the context of the wider piece around how people do move around the island, because I very much welcome that move towards a more active form of travel, but it is part of the overall jigsaw. And I think for me, as infrastructure minister, it's about balance and about ensuring that whatever people's choice of travel, that there is a solution for them. And it's clearly unrealistic for every journey to right across the island to be done in an active manner. Equally, do we want every journey being done in private cars, whatever the length? The answer's no to that as well. And what we need to provide is an infrastructure, an ecosystem, if you like, that provides choices, whether they be private travel, active travel, public transport, and ensures that we're set up in the right manner to support those, but to make sure that where people have a desire to travel in a certain way, the right provision is made, and that we make it as easy as possible for that to happen.
You're presented with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make those changes, aren't you, off the back of, as we said, unusual circumstances?
The unusual circumstances have shown what was possible in that particular situation. I think it has created an awareness and an engagement around these sort of issues. I think it's really important that as a community we engage with this. It's not about one department of government taking a position. It's about the 84,500 people on the Isle of Man really thinking about and discussing what we want the island to be like and to look like, and how we make sure we've got an inclusive approach which works for everybody.
Mr. Shimmins, you.
Yes, and I absolutely agree with that. And perhaps if I could point to a specific example, and if we look at the works that have just been completed on the Heritage Trail between Douglas and Peel, you've seen an explosion in usage on that track, which is fantastic. So
is that measured?
Well, there are counters there. I haven't seen the data, but I've been on the trail, which goes through Middle, and it's been fantastic to see so many people, all shapes and sizes, yes, actively travelling. Some of them are walking, some of them are cycling, some of them have got electric bikes. This is all ages, all sexes, but also it's an asset for the whole island. So the vision really is to enable a family to cycle from Douglas Prom to Peel Prom and back, and you're starting to see that, which is just fantastic. And if you look at the Quarter Bridge Toucan crossing, which is the first that we've seen on the island in terms of enabling walkers and cyclists to cross that really busy junction, which had a very difficult sightline with the wall, which has now been taken away there. You were taking your life in your own hands, really, trying to cross that road at times, but now it's so much safer. And as a result of that investment, you're seeing people use it, and that is, I think, brilliant. But what really pleases me is the way that it's not just one particular group of people that's using it. It's all ages. It's young families. It's older people on electric bikes, and they're getting out. They're getting some fresh air, and they're smiling, which is just fantastic.
That's true for your constituents, of course, and people from Glenvine and from Crosby are likely to be the ones, and Union Mills, using that path for most. The same provision isn't there for people in other places, in other parts of the island.
Well, I'm not sure it's just the people that live in Glenvine and Crosby. I think you're also seeing people from Douglas and from Peel using it as well, at the weekends particularly. And because it's a relatively flat trajectory on that, because it goes across the Central Valley, it's relatively easy for people. There's not hills that people have to go up. So as I say, all ages are using it. Although with electric bikes these days, you can get up most hills. Certainly, I would like to see a further extension of that provision, just to make it safer for people to travel. I think.
Well, we are going to see a further extension of that, Mr. Baker, aren't we, up the west coast?
We are, absolutely. There's the scheme from St John's to Kirkmichael is at the sort of final design stage at this point. We've got some planned applications that are going in around replacing the bridges at Ballylease, Glenmore and Glenwillan as part of that scheme, and we're hoping to be on site at the back end of this year with about a 12-month construction period, and that will build very much on the work that's already in place that Bill's referred to, and hopefully long term that will take the Heritage Trail all the way up to back up to Ramsey, where of course it was the original Ramsey to St John's and then Peel to Douglas train line. So we're repurposing an underutilised, almost redundant asset, and I think that's a very smart piece of work to be doing. And
that's more for leisure purposes, isn't it, rather than for commuters? Whereas the Central Valley could be used for commuting.
It could. I mean, both could be used for commuters, and I think people have got fixated with this term active travel. I see it in the broader sense. It's clearly all part of the same initiative and the same theme, which is getting people more active and them making and having the opportunity to make choices. So, frankly, I think it's great whether it's used for commuting, which clearly is going to be more linked to people going in and out of Douglas for work, and they're more likely to be travelling the shorter distances, or whether it's the sort of leisure market that Bill referred to earlier with the families, etc., or even just recreational, getting out for exercise. I think all those things are valuable, and what we're doing is putting in place the infrastructure to allow people to make the choices, and if it's right for people to use it for commuting, they'll do that, and if it's right for them just using it for leisure, they'll do that as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. And there's been a lot of research done on active travel schemes in terms of infrastructure that's been put in place. And the UK government did a review of a dozen schemes that had taken place over the last few years, and they showed that for every £1 spent on the scheme, you got £8 or £9 back in terms of that health benefit. So yes, I think recreational is helpful, but I think also we have quite a lot of data. And that shows from the last census that there's a fair number of people who live in the outlying estates around Douglas, who work in Douglas or in the business parks around Douglas, who drive relatively short distances. So it's less than 3 miles. So Onchan to Douglas, Farm Hill, Governor's Hill, and actually it would be great to see dedicated, segregated, safe walking and cycling routes for these people, because realistically, not that many people are going to commute actively from Ramsey to Douglas. There'll be a few, but not many. The lowest hanging fruit for this is around Douglas, and I certainly would love to see this extended further, because actually that recreational provision starts to become quite an exciting proposition for tourism, because the active tourism market is expanding significantly, and it's very valuable for other islands. So you see the likes of Mallorca, Tenerife receiving over 500,000 tourists each year.
They're substantially better climates. They're going to be more open to active travel because it's going to be a more pleasant experience for people than it is here, isn't it?
Well, it's certainly hotter, but actually for active holidays, sometimes baking heat is not ideal, to be honest. So I think and the feedback that I've received, if you look at what Scotland's done, if you look at what Ireland's done, they've grown their active travel provision, and it's their fastest growing segment for tourism, and our climate is very similar. So if we could create a network, actually that becomes a very exciting proposition as we look to grow our visitor economy, and we've got a great story to tell, but it needs to be safe. The safety is the key, really.
This is long-term thinking, though, isn't it? And within the current network that we have in place, people who are going to be open to the idea of travelling actively probably are already, aren't they?
Well, that's not necessarily the case. So we did a number of consultations and surveys at the outset of the active travel policy, which was approved by Tynwald, and that showed that the biggest concern for people was the road safety. So if you go to most of the primary schools are across the island, the car park is rammed at the start of the day and at the end of the day. Often the police are sometimes called because of the issues that creates. And so a lot of children are being dropped off and picked up each day. And then when you talk to the parents, the feedback you get in terms of consultation is actually, I'd love for my child to be able to walk or cycle to school, but it's just not safe on the road. So that's why active travel provision is essential. I certainly don't believe that the people who would actively travel are the people that are doing it just now. I think the biggest fear is road safety, and we can make it safer. I think we'll see a significant increase in the number of people who choose to do that. As Tim says, not everyone can do it because they've got other commitments, that they may have health constraints, but if we can make it safe, we know the experience that we've seen already and the experience from elsewhere is actually participation rates increase significantly.